What's up, team? Sean from Rest to Live here. And I get this question all the time. How do I break into software sales? How do I get into the SaaS business? How do I get a job that pays six, maybe even seven figures a year? And I wanted to put something together that would really act as a framework for how to think about getting these jobs in a really simple way. I've seen a bunch of other videos on YouTube like this, and my gut is telling me these folks are either very new at this or have never been in a hiring side of the business. So I want to give the perspective of someone who's got 20 years of doing this, plus the hiring side of it as well. So I want to jump into a nice, easy to understand deck, and I want to make this really simple. And what I would encourage you to do is please let me know in the comments below what other questions you have, if there's things that would be helpful. I would be more than happy to do a live stream version of this as well, if there's enough people who want to join that. And we can work on scheduling that on Twitter or whatever it works out as. But without further ado, let's jump on in. The idea of getting a software sales job is sort of like the professional athlete of the earnings world in a lot of ways. Even entry-level roles are in the six figures. Once you get established, it's very reasonable to earn in the mid six-figure range, and top performers are regularly breaking the seven-figure mark. It's not uncommon at all, even nowadays. But there's a lot of things to understand in terms of your level of experience, your background, who your targets are, how you're targeting these companies, and where it makes sense to start, right? If you have no experience, maybe jumping right in is going to be tough, but there's ways we can mitigate that and get your foot in the door. So without further ado, I'm going to jump into my screen share here. Excuse me. Okay, and of course, let me find my button here so I can share my slides. So, team, real simple, right? A lot of folks want to break into software sales as a career, and I want this to be a really easy way to think about how to start. So let's jump into it right now. So here's my expectations, right? The data and everything I'm writing about is based on the current situation in 2023. We are seeing a lot of layoffs. We are seeing a lot of stress in the market. So it's very important that when you see what I wrote here and the way I explain it, it's very important to understand these are not meant as one-off suggestions. This is the level of depth hiring managers, recruiters, teams are going to be expecting from you. I can do a deeper dive on what happens during the interviews, but the first part is really how do we get to that point and how do we get in the door? And this is a proven method that not only works, but works really well. And I will tell you first and foremost, I can talk to any recruiter or any hiring manager out there. If you are cold applying to jobs, your odds of getting those jobs are much lower than if you can get a warm intro or a warm introduction to someone already in the process, already in that hiring team, already with an open role. So it's really important to call that out, that if you're randomly applying for jobs and you don't have crazy experience and you don't have years and years of results, you're probably not going to get that job. In fact, you're probably not even going to get that interview. And even if you get that interview, you'll be so unprepared for the expectations of it, you're not going to end up getting the job. So my goal here was really to preface all of this of what to do before you start applying for jobs and looking for this role. So a big theme is going to be research and depth of understanding. This is very different than most jobs. There are a lot of steps that happen after you get past a recruiter. Presentations, demos. You have to be able to build or show what you're doing. You have to have deep and in-depth knowledge. You have to speak to your previous experience. But if we can mitigate that early in the process, you'll be able to gain that experience within the process of how you learn about and execute on this plan. So what I often like to think about here is, who are you and why do you fit the company? This goes back to research and depth. And where is the ideal fit based on your background? I'll cover this as well as we go through. And the other piece of this I want to call out, and I don't want this to come across as being negative, but are there immovable hurdles that you can't get around to getting this kind of a job? If you're not comfortable presenting or demoing in front of people, that might be a problem. If you are not confident in your ability to understand technology, that might be a problem. Now, those are problems you certainly can overcome, but if you don't believe you can, all the training, research, and work in the world isn't going to make a difference if when it comes time to do it, you're not comfortable doing it. So with that, let's pop on in here, team. Excuse me. So very first thing I want to jump into, and this is tantamount importance. This, to me, is the single most important part of everything we're going to talk about today. If you are not networking, you are not going to get these jobs. It is 100% a who you know business. Okay. This isn't to say there aren't stories of people who fall into jobs and things like that, but we're not talking about 40, 50, 60K here. We're talking about what we call OTEs in the hundreds of thousands of dollars. So just an important point, in OTE is an on-target earnings. Depending on the company and the type of role, typically what you'll see is an OTE that is 50% salary 50% earnings at quota achievement. A lot of the OTEs we're seeing for folks are, 200, 230, 250, 300. It goes up from there, but just assume that's really where you're targeting here for sort of getting your feet into the software sales realm, assuming you have enough relevant background and you do the right things in networking. So I want to call this out and be really obvious in terms of networking. When I say everywhere, team, I mean everywhere. You need to be talking about what you want, why you want it, and the value you're going to bring. So when you go and think about where should you start today, you're watching this video, you want a six-figure job in software sales. Here's what you need to do. You need to make it clear to your friends and your family, right? Do you have any connections who work in this business? I'd love to talk to them. You want to get on LinkedIn and start to think about the target companies that are interesting to you. What kind of technology do you feel like you could quickly pick up and sell, right? It could be anything from analytics. It could be databases. It could be MDM or CDP. It could be CRM systems. It could be point solutions. It could be payment processing systems, right? Figure out a place where maybe you have the most comfort or you feel like you could pick up quickly, or wait until you do some research. But make sure you start to really get tight on where you think you would be a good fit and what your background will bring from a value perspective. On LinkedIn, identify those companies and follow them. Okay. You really have to start to know what they're doing when they post things like webinars or events. Join them. And by the way, you shouldn't have to pay anyone for any of this. I also want to call this out. There's a lot of folks who sell courses or training on how to do this. I've never in my life hired anyone who's paid for training to get a job. So take that from someone who's done a lot of hiring in my career. So again, LinkedIn, friends, family, social media, webinars, start letting people know, hi, my name's Sean. I'm really interested in software sales. I think I would be a huge value add. I'd love to learn more about what your company does. You don't have to start from a negative. You don't have to start with a lack of experience or, hey, I don't know much about this, or I've never seen it before. Start to join the webinars. Start to watch the recorded demos. Go on YouTube and look to see if they have product introductions, product demos. Go to their websites. See if they offer any kind of free training or customer reviews or an about page, right? Really get in there and start to network in and around the data. And the most important thing, when you find people from those companies who are posting on LinkedIn, as an example, start to comment, right? Hey, great point. I love what you're thinking here, and connect with those people. You need to start building your network, but also it can't be blind. You can't just simply say, hey, you don't know me. I'd like to grab 15 minutes with you. Start to create a presence for yourself on LinkedIn, right? Post some of your own thoughts about the industry you're trying to break into. Post some of your own thoughts about where you think the direction of software is going, or the particular industry or sector or solution you're looking at. Okay. And that's the messaging part of this, is continuously be pushing out what you're learning, what you're thinking about, what you're hearing, right? You need to prove that you have value, you can quickly understand and see this realm. So when you bring it back to those people you're networking with, you're a known, right? You have something to say, you have a point of view about the business. And this really helps you to start to meet these people, connect with them, and be able to say things like, hey, I noticed your company was hiring. I'm really interested in the role. Could I grab 15 minutes with you? And I'll tell you, a bonus team, almost every large company out there pays a big finder's fee to fill open roles. So I spent about 10 years at IBM. We were paying $6,000 if you referred someone and they were hired. So these reps are also going to have some reason why they want to help you apply to that job and get hired. So keep that in mind too. There's a little bit of a back and forth here. Now, the other piece of this that I think too many people who have never worked in this field need to understand is that this is a continuous, never-ending motion. You don't make this kind of money because you tried it and it didn't work, so you gave up. You, in this kind of a role, might have to make thousands, tens of thousands of cold calls. You might have to present the same thing hundreds of times before you get your first sale, or even the first person on the phone, perhaps. So it's best to really practice and get this under your belt as soon as possible from a networking perspective, right? How do I continuously find new targets and roles, people associated with those roles, messaging, information, go to markets, right? How do I keep building that motion, building that strength? Once I've met some of the reps of the company I'm targeting, I want to see if I can get an introduction to a manager and just say, hey, I love what I'm hearing about your company, your team. If you ever have an opening, I'd love to talk to you about it, right? Start to plant those seeds, but do it across a wide range of companies, of contacts, right? And don't do it once in a while. Get on there every day and post something, right? Ask for advice. Ask people openly all the time and say, hey, how do I get my foot in the door here? Is there a pathway? What you'll find is a lot of times there are pathways that exist, right? Maybe getting that six-figure sales job isn't the first pathway. Maybe it's getting into what's known as an SDR or a BDR role to start. So an SDR role, just for the sake of breaking from my example here for a second, That's a sales development rep. They typically handle the inbound leads that come in. They follow up on the leads and try to set meetings, right? It's not going to pay the same as a sales job, but it's a great way to get into the business, get used to talking the talk, learning the lingo. Now, on the flip side, a BDR is the business development rep. They're doing more of the outbound calling. They're trying to set appointments, build interest, find new people to talk to, and then get those in front of sales reps. So those are two great ways to get started if you don't have a strong background. Now, all that being said, of course, we'd love to see you get started as quick as possible into a really great role, but just know that there is no option here for failure. It's just a question of how are you continuously and persistently asking, looking, and hunting down the opportunities and finding other ways to get in as well. Now, hopefully my picture's not blocking this, so I'm going to move my little thing here over just so I can see better. So let's just say you've been really successful. You've persistently traced down, tracked, learned, done the research, know everything you can know. Let's talk about what happens when you finally get that interview, right? You got a recruiter on the phone who's willing to take a meeting with you. And team, I want to be super clear here because this is, again, I've heard this bad advice given so many times. Recruiters are not necessarily going to say no to you, right? What a recruiter is going to do, because you can apply to 100 jobs right now while you're watching this video, and you're going to get a bunch of interviews. The problem is people go into those interviews not fully prepared for the next step, and it sets them back a little bit. So even when you're talking to a recruiter, it's important to approach it as if you're talking to the hiring manager or the team of hiring reviewers, okay? So this to me is bare minimum if you even want to get and talk to me for a job, right? These are the bare minimum requirements I expect from a basic perspective. On the company side, I want you to know the company you're applying to. This means the leaders, the financials, the mission, the value, the awards this company has, right? How long have they been in business? How many customers do they have? Who are their customers? What's the sector, the industry? What are they selling? Is it products? Is it services? Is it a combination of the two? Are they a transactional business or more of a strategic business? Are they selling huge deals or are they selling small deals? Is it a gigantic platform selling lots of things? Or is it a very specific point of sale type of thing, right? A specific product that solves a specific problem. So again, when I say this, I want you to really come at this and think to yourself, you're getting on this interview to really sell them as the sales rep on what you know about the company, the value of doing business with this company, where they're going, where they've been. But then you want to transition and really speak to the fact that, look, I know this product really well, although I haven't done this before, to be fully transparent. Here's what I do know about it, right? I want you to be the sales rep for the product that you're going to be selling once you get past these interviews. Now, on the flip side, I also want you to think about this from a competitive perspective, not just their competitors, but your competitors who are trying to get this job rather than you getting it. So I want you to also read and understand everything about the sector and who their primary competitors are. More important, if you can bring a couple of those names and say, look, I've also looked at company X, Y, and Z. They're in a similar sector to you, but I really think you're the leader, and here's why I think that's the case, right? Share your point of view on the differentials. That's going to go a long way. I mentioned this previously. I want to say it again. Come in prepared as if you've already been selling this product. This means watch and review demos of the product, right? A demo is a demonstration of a software product. They're typically going to be online. They're going to be on their website. They're going to be on YouTube. I know I'm being redundant, team, but I think that a lot of people really don't understand how hard it is to get these jobs and why it's so hard to get them. There's a lot of people going for high-paying jobs, and you can differentiate yourself literally as simple as knowing and understanding how to talk about and deliver the messaging and the pitch on that product, because I've got news for you. You're going to have to do that at some point during the interview process. Also understand where the challenges are with the product and call it out. Say, hey, I did see some reviews that mentioned, it was hard for the customer to stand up and build it. And ask a question, say, how do you solve for that by working with consultants or professional services or third-party integrators? This is really going to show that you know the industry, although you're not necessarily in it today. The biggest piece from a must-have, if you even want to get past this, okay? You have to know who the hiring team is, and you need to be prepared for this. Go on LinkedIn, understand real things about them. This isn't just the old school, oh, I noticed you went to this college. Hey, I love watching their football games. That's okay, and that's surface level. But really understand, what was their career path? What was their education path? What are you learning about them? Did they start from the bottom and rise all the way to the top? Did they go to a certain school for a certain reason and make a shift? Call that out. Say, hey, I noticed you went to school for accounting. Now you work in software sales. What caused that? What was the reason you did that? And, it might be something really unique. It might be something really interesting. And you can kind of, key into that and tell that story about how you're doing the same thing. Think about that value. You may not be a perfect fit today, but they weren't either when they got started. So look for things like that. Look for areas to bring your story to the interview. Now let's go one more level deep here. These are the basics to me where you at least have a shot of continuing the conversation. If you really want to win the job, you have to hit what we're going to call the level up stage. This is really, really bringing real information to prove that you not only know how to do the outbound efforts to find your own leads, but you can also close the deals, because that's ultimately what you're doing in this interview. So before your very first interview with a recruiter or hiring manager, as we talked about earlier in this video, I want to make sure you're reaching out to current employees, but not just other sales reps. That's maybe where you would have started, but now I want you to really think about it from the SDR and the BDR motion, and look for other managers in the business as well. See if you can get something going as far as what they think about the business. What are their goals in the business? How did they get in and what worked on their interviews, right? By knowing that, you can reference those things in your interview to really say, look, I've done a lot of work. That's how excited I am to be here. The other piece of this as well, and this can be a little bit tough for folks who maybe aren't coming from this world, but it's worth learning how to do it, is you need to know where the company is trying to go and how you are going to help them get there. Maybe they're cutting costs. Maybe they're cutting employees, so they need to be more strategic about spending. Maybe they're looking to get to $1 billion of revenue because they're a small company, or maybe they're looking to go IPO soon. Perhaps they were recently purchased by a private equity fund, right? Maybe there's going to be a hiring spree coming up. You look for those kinds of things in recent articles. Look for it on the news channels, the financial news channels. If there's any articles that have come out or videos that have come out about these companies, and really be able to talk about that as well. But one of the best things you can really do here, and it's so simple and it's already done for you. And if you watch this channel anyways, we go over this all the time. Read their financial reports and their investor presentations. They're going to call out exactly where they're trying to go, the advantages that they have, as well as the disadvantages that they have as well. So they're giving you all this information. And that's why when I say you're going to level up to win the job, you're just taking the step to prove that this is the level of work you do to win. And you're going to do that when they hire you. Now, the other part of leveling up is really you, right? We haven't quite talked about this, but this is the biggest piece. We've talked about all these other components of it, but who are you, right? Your story is the selling motion, the story of you, where you got started, how your career has gone, what your education level is, what your technical skills might be. If you don't have an education or formal education like a college degree, that's okay, team. Don't let that stop you. Talk about the reasons you didn't. You had your own business. You decided to go right to work. You didn't have an option because your family didn't have money at that time. Or maybe you have an advanced degree. You've got a master's in something unrelated, but you realize that, look, when I got that master's, I was passionate about it, but I was 24 years old. I really want to make a shift into higher growth, into more challenges. I love being challenged. That's why I played sports all through high school or college, right? That whole story of you is really important. But what's even more important is how you really find a way to deploy and explain what makes you unique, what skills, experiences you have that would help them gain by hiring you, right? Your entire mission is to have them hang up the phone and think, wow, we better get this person hired, or we're going to lose out to a competitor who hires this person. When you're just getting started on this path, it can feel like that's never going to happen. But by the time you finish doing all of these things, getting it on paper, starting the networking, starting the continuous and persistent reach outs, you're going to build that persona for yourself. The other big part of this as well, when you're on the phone with these hiring folks, is you're interviewing them, right? When you're going for your first big high paying job, it can feel very desperate. Like, what if I say the wrong thing? What if I drop a pass? What if I stumble with my words? What if I make a mistake? Team, in this realm, it is a two-way street. If I'm going to look for another job, I expect them to be recruiting me. You need to approach it from the same perspective as like, hey, look, I noticed this job. I've talked to a lot of people at the company. I feel like I'd be a great fit. I've already told you why. I'm really curious, what's your approach? Why did you join the company? What brought you here? How do you approach working together as a team? How do you approach finding new business? How do you approach managing and running the business? Right? That's a big piece of this as well. So all of this is going to go into how you can pivot quickly and answer some additional questions. They talk about they like to do deep level research. Well, say, and that's what I've already done. And I think I can be really good at this continuing forward. So all little things are going to really help here. Now, what I really want to share, I realize very few people approach it like this, but I think it's super, Super important. Have a schedule that you're going to stick to. Because again, team, I want to take a pause for a second. These jobs pay really, really well because they're performance-based jobs. So if you get this role and you aren't able to actually do the job, they will not just let you sit around, you will be let go. So you have to keep that in mind, that if you can't manage this process in getting it, you're not going to manage it once you have it. So even when I think about scheduling how I'm going to approach and attack this mission, I'm doing it during the pre-interview process. So just as an example, I realize my face is probably right in the way of everything here. I just drew out sort of a fake little timeline here, and this is a regular thing I do in my full-time role. And I want you to just think about how you're going to do this for yourself. And I've tried to make this really easy, so feel free to copy it. Your first step is really identifying the target roles and companies that are of interest to you. Take the money off the table for a second, right? The money is going to be there in software. Where would you ideally like to be that you feel is going to be a good fit in a company that sort of speaks to you, right? Identify your learning path based on the requirements of the jobs they're hiring for. So go to their career page, look at what they're hiring for, and look at experience, requirements, start dates, hiring teams. Most companies nowadays, depending on where they're located, have to actually list what the pay range will be. It's going to be a big range, full warning team, but they will typically list that out as well. The key is, once you know where you want to be, you need to understand what they're looking for. You need to then start to build those skills into your resume, into your story, right? It doesn't have to be exact, but start to build that story. After you identify the target and what learning you need to do, start joining and meeting people connected to the company. This can be on LinkedIn, it can be on Twitter, it can be anywhere, frankly. It can be friends and family, it can be other people you meet. Once you sort of establish that, you have some sort of a POV, you're adding some value, I think you're perfectly fine and reasonable to say, look, I'd love some help, and start asking for follow-ups. Start reaching out to them and start asking if they can jump on the call. I'll call for 15 or 30 minutes. I do it all the time, frankly, team. And I'm always happy to do it too if the person's genuinely trying to do something. And then I think from there, really just, again, this is a mock version of this, but, start to schedule meetings with some recruiters and see if you can get those interviews. Maybe there's a role that doesn't look like it's a great fit, but see if you can get scheduled a call with the recruiter anyways and take it as practice. I know recruiters are not going to love that I just said that, but there's nothing wrong with doing it, right? Just see how it goes, get a feel for what they're asking. And what you're going to find is it's generally pretty friendly. They're not there to beat you up. They're not there to make you feel bad. They're looking to fill a role. You're a potential candidate for the role. See what they want and see what you need to do next time. So again, this is the way I want you to think about this. If you notice, this feels a lot like starting your own business. And I think it's important that you understand that once you get this role, you are running your own business. You are running your own company. You might work for this other company, but you're responsible for your territory, your patch, your customers, your products, and you need to hit that number or you're going to go out of business. That's why I approach it at this level of seriousness, even from here as well. Excuse me. So I want to give you some real next steps that I think anyone watching this could easily do. Number one, I want you to build a mock resume. Okay. Get the version of you that exists right now, get it down on paper, and have it ready to be sent out to recruiters to open jobs. It's important that we establish where we are with honesty and start to identify where there could be gaps based on the requirements we're seeing on these career sites. Okay. Next step is really understanding where there could be gaps and requirements that you don't currently fill, and figure out how we can either add those skills or adjust the resume, or even reach out to folks to help mitigate that. Right? This doesn't mean lying. You should, first of all, team, if you haven't been through this, this is worth stopping for a second. You don't just get through an interview and get a job. You oftentimes have to pass tests. You have to do demos and presentations. You have to prove your acumen with math, right? Some of these tests that we go through are very complex. Now, not all jobs will do this, but the higher paying jobs will a lot of times. So that's why I'm saying make sure you understand what the process of the recruitment looks like. Ask those questions during that. And this is where talking to people who already work there is going to be a huge help for you. Now, finally, the next step I have after you've done the resume, you start to understand those gaps and requirements you need to fill, start asking for help, right? Buy people coffee if they're in your area, right? Network with more folks. Get on LinkedIn again and again and again and follow and follow and follow. Because I want to call this out, and I wrote it down, but I want to really stop again and say this. Getting a job that pays 6 or 7 figures requires a whole lot of work on your part on the front end before you even get that job. No one just decides they're going to play in the NFL and have a 7-figure income randomly. It takes 20 years of learning the game, working out, cardio, weightlifting, nutrition, You're playing at Pop Warner, then high school, then college. You're getting recruited. You're making videos. You're training the whole time. You have to treat this the same way. This really is the professional sports of work. It's performance based. It has huge upside if you're good, and it has no bottom really if you're bad, right? You're gone. So just keep that in mind. So what I really want to do is at the end of this, wish everybody good luck. Again, I said it previously, but drop it in the comments if you got additional questions. If you think a live stream would be really helpful to ask some real questions. But I want to leave you with these three things as you move forward from today. You have to make it about your story, right? Who are you? Why are you the right person for the job? Why do you want this job? And how are you going to impact that company once they hire you? And be presumptuous once they hire you. Know your target company and the audience you're going to be speaking to. And team, most importantly, you have to be persistent and flexible in your approach. If you get 50 no's in a row, great. Those are out of the way now. Now there's more room for yeses. Be persistent, be flexible, do not give up on yourself. That's the most important thing I can share today. And with that, hopefully this was valuable to some folks out there. I get many, many, many questions about this all the time. I thought maybe just putting it together in a nice, clean slide would be great. And with that, thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for commenting below. And let me know what else I can do, team. Thanks so much. Have a good one.